a statement that took the world by surprise. A direct, urgent warning from none other than the President of the United States. Donald Trump has just asked for the immediate evacuation of all U.S. citizens in Tehran, the capital of Iran. Last night during a press conference broadcast, Trump made a serious statement. For the reasons of national security, I ask all Americans to leave Iran immediately. The situation is quickly deteriorating and we cannot guarantee their safety in the next few hours. This phrase was enough to light the maximum alert in all intelligence agencies around the world. Embassies in Tehran began organizing emergency flights, while U.S. citizens, tourists, and diplomats ran to Imam Khomeini Airport in the desperate attempt to leave the country before it's too late. But what is behind this desperate request? Why did Trump make this statement so hard and direct now? To understand what is happening, you need to go back a few weeks and analyze what really unfolds in the heart of the Middle East. The climb between Israel and Iran reached a new level of tension. In recent weeks, Israeli airstrikes have reached strategic targets in Syrian and Iranian territory. In response, Tehran intensified its operations in the region and accelerated the nuclear program. What was an indirect conflict made of occasional attacks and secret operations is now becoming an open war threat. Israel, concerned about Iran's nuclear advancement, has already made it clear, if necessary, it will make a direct attack on Iranian nuclear facilities. And the great focus of this voltage has name and address: Fordow's nuclear complex, an underground installation protected by tons of concrete and excavated in the Iranian mountains. According to recent reports from the International Atomic Energy Agency, Iran has already reached uranium enrichment levels of over 83%, a number that leaves the international community on maximum alert. Military experts say that without help from the United States, Israel simply has no ability to destroy Fordow. Why? Because only a specific weapon could penetrate the defenses of that place. GBU-57, also known as MOP Massive Ordnance Penetrator. A 14-ton pump, capable of crossing dozens of meters of rock before exploding. But it has a crucial detail. This weapon can only be launched by a B-2 Spirit bomber, a plane that only the United States has. And that puts Donald Trump before one of the greatest dilemmas of his presidency. If Trump provides this weapon to Israel, or if the United States participates directly in the operation, Washington will become an active part in the conflict. Something that Trump himself promised to avoid since his election campaign when he said, "Enough of endless wars in the Middle East." Meanwhile, U.S. military movement does not stop growing. Pentagon sources confirmed that tanker planes and additional fighters were moved to bases in Europe and the Persian Gulf. Ready troops were also positioned. So far, the White House insists, we are still in a defensive position. No decision has been made about any direct participation in an attack on Iran. But Trump's contradictory signs on social networks leave the whole world confused. In some tweets, he reinforces the desire for peace. In others, he makes veiled threats, saying that all options are on the table and that the United States are ready for anything. The doubt remains. Is Trump just bluffing to force Iran to retreat? Or are the United States, in fact, a few steps from a new war in the Middle East? While the world carefully followed each movement from Washington, new information began to emerge. Recognition satellites caught an intense movement of U.S. military aircraft. KC-135 and KC-10 tank airplanes were massive to bases in Eastern Europe and the Persian Gulf. This type of displacement only happens at times of preparation for large-scale operations, when it is necessary to ensure the refueling of fighters and bombers during long-range missions. In addition, U.S. Air Force units were seen by embarking specialized equipment, including penetration pumps, tactical communication systems, and electronic war kits. At the same time, the Department of Defense ordered warships, including destroyers equipped with the Aegis system, to position themselves in strategic locations near Iran. The USS Dwight D. Eisenhower, one of the main aircraft carriers of the American fleet, was dislocated to the Sea of Arabia, further increasing the offensive capacity of the United States in the region. All this movement has increased the fear that a military action was imminent. But Trump's dilemma still persisted. On the one hand, the military counselors pressured for a firm response, arguing that the Iranian nuclear advance represented a real and immediate threat not only to Israel, but all the balance of power in the Middle East. On the other hand, political advisors remembered that an attack on Iran could have devastating consequences for the United States, both militarily and economically. Not to mention the impact on the approaching elections. Israel, in turn, did not hide his concern. Sources close to the government of Benjamin Netanyahu reported that behind the scenes, Israeli Prime Minister intensified the pressure on Trump. Netanyahu knew that Israel had no technical capacity to destroy Fordow alone. Only with the GBU-57, launched from an American B-2, it would be possible to reach the depths of that installation. What's more, even if Israel received the bomb, it wouldn't have a plane capable of carrying it. The negotiations behind the scenes were tense. Israeli authorities sent delegations to Washington, seeking to convince the U.S. government of the urgency to act. The central argument was simple. If the U.S. did not help now, in a few months Iran would have enough material to produce a nuclear bomb. For Israel, this was a red line that could not be crossed. Meanwhile, Trump kept his ambiguous stance. In interviews, he said he preferred a diplomatic solution. But on social networks, he adopted an increasingly aggressive tone. Tweets like "Iran is playing with fire" and "Our patience has a limit" began to circulate, further increasing the climate of uncertainty. In the international community, the reactions were immediate. Russia and China expressed concern for military climbing. Both countries warned that any attack on Iran could have unpredictable consequences for global stability. Kremlin made it clear that it would consider an American military intervention as a direct threat to regional security, while Beijing called for restraint from all parties. The financial markets reacted in panic. The price of the oil barrel fired, surpassing $100, something that has not happened for years. Investors around the world began to migrate to assets considered safer, such as gold and dollar, predicting a possible global economic crisis in the event of war. Within the U.S. government itself, divisions emerged. While the State Department tried to keep diplomatic channels open with Tehran, the Pentagon accelerated preparations for a possible attack. Intelligence reports showed that Iran reinforced its anti-aircraft defenses and moved ballistic missiles for strategic positions, preparing for the worst. The meetings in the White House room have become almost daily. Trump met with his main national security advisors, the Secretary of Defense, the head of the Joint Staff, and the CIA. Each new information seemed to push the United States a step closer to the confrontation. And even in all this, the White House was still officially denying any decision on an imminent military action. At a press conference, the government spokeswoman stressed, "We are evaluating all the options. Our focus is still a diplomatic solution. But we make it clear that we will protect our interests and our allies." What was increasingly clear to the whole world is that by this time any spark could trigger a fire of catastrophic proportions. An error of calculation, a misunderstood provocation, or even an isolated attack could put United States and Iran face to face on a battlefield. While the eyes of the world remained fixed in the White House, the tension on the streets of Tehran reached unsustainable levels. Foreign embassies operated at an emergency, organizing evacuation flights to their citizens. International news agencies transmitted images of people in queues at airports, hastily carrying bags, while speakers announced flight cancellations and closing air routes. The fear was stamped on the faces. Everyone knew that something big was about to happen. At the same time, the Iranian government was not stopped. In a speech broadcast on state television, Iran's supreme leader, their Khamenei, said the country was ready to respond to any aggression. He stated, "Iran does not seek war, but if attacked, our answer will be devastating." Shortly thereafter, missile images were released being moved for strategic positions and military exercises simulating an enemy airstrike. Behind the scenes of international diplomacy, the world powers desperately tried to avoid the worst. Leaders of the European Union, the United Nations, and the Arab League asked for moderation. Russia, a harder tone, warned the United States that an attack on Iran would be seen as a direct threat to regional stability. China, in turn, reinforced its support for a peaceful solution, but made it clear that it would not accept forced change in the power balance in the Middle East. Meanwhile, the New York Stock Exchange recorded historical falls. the oil market explodes. The barrel exceeded $120, with predictions that it could reach $150 if the war was triggered. Maritime transport companies already reported difficulty operating in the Strait of Hormuz, one of the main routes for the flow of world oil. In Washington, the pressure on Trump increased every minute. Parliamentarians from both parties required clarification. Some advocated surgical action to destroy the Fordow complex and other Iranian military facilities. Others warned that such an attack would drag the United States into an endless conflict with unpredictable consequences. Trump, in turn, was still publishing dubious messages. In a moment, he said he wanted peace. In the other, it suggested that Iran would make the biggest mistake in its history if it challenged the United States. Inside the White House, the scenarios were all mapped, from a limited attack to a prolonged military campaign. The options were on the table, but the final decision still depended on a variable that no one could predict: Iran's reaction. American intelligence warned that Iran could retaliate, attacking U.S. Gulf bases, encouraging allied militias in Lebanon, Iraq, and Syria, or even performing cyber attacks against United States critical infrastructure. The risk of a domino effect was real. An action in Tehran could trigger reactions in Tel Aviv, Baghdad, Riyadh, and even Washington. The Pentagon reinforced the defense of American bases in the region. Patriot missiles were repositioned. Nuclear submarines were moved to strategic areas. F-23 and F-35 fighters assumed constant patrols. The climate was pre-war, and yet the order of attack had not yet been given. On the Iranian side, the authorities kept the hard line. The foreign minister said in an interview, "If we are attacked, we will not just react. Let's teach the attackers a lesson they will never forget." Images of volunteers enlisted on the streets circulated on Iranian social networks, feeding nationalism and preparing the population for what could be to come. The future of the war and the Iranian regime seemed about to be decided in the next few hours or days. International analysts provided that if the U.S. really got involved directly in an attack, the conflict could last for years and spread throughout the region. The conversations between the U.S. military leaders revolved around deadlines, priority targets, and possible civilian withdrawal routes. In the late afternoon, news channels from around the world went into continuous broadcast. Special reports, analysts, military experts, all speculating when and if the missiles would begin to fly. But one thing was certain: the watch was running. Each minute without a decision, it seemed only to increase the risk of a fatal error. And when it comes to the Middle East, nuclear weapons and decisions made under pressure, a small movement can change the destination of millions of people. While the world held the breath, waiting for Trump's next ad, the question that echoed was only one: will we be watching the beginning of a new world war in the next few hours?